This has been a deeply troubling last 12 hours, 24 hours, I guess. You know, the House went about trying to repeal and it's just tough to say Affordable Care Act because of the thousands of people we've heard from in my district in the last 7 years who have just been devastated by the costs that skyrocketed, the premiums that skyrocketed, the deductibles that had skyrocketed, the critically important doctor or medicine or facility that President Obama promised they could keep that were taken away by Obamacare. It's just hard to call it the Affordable Care Act because it has cost some people everything. But every Republican had promised we would repeal Obamacare. It's possible Susan Collins in the Senate may not have. She didn't vote for it, repeal in the last Congress, but it's my understanding that virtually everybody had promised, if you will elect me or re-elect me, I will vote for repeal. And I have literally prayed for Senator John McCain with the cancer that they found out has overtaken him, and I do hope and pray for speedy, full recovery. But I do recall vividly that election in Arizona, and apparently he was extremely concerned about getting reelected. There was a hard-charging opposition in the Republican primary, more than one primary opponent, and as I recall, there were repeated promises that the senator, if the good people of Arizona would just re-elect him, give him another 6 years, he would be working tirelessly. He'd be working so hard to repeal Obamacare. And I did go down to the Senate chamber this week, a couple of days ago. I went down because I thought it would be historic, potentially, to have the Senate vote to proceed to debate on what we hoped would be an actual repeal of Obamacare. Turns out they called it a skinny bill or skinny repeal. Wasn't much of a repeal at all. And in fact, I guess there's a decent chance if that had passed and become law, it may have very well ensured the total collapse of private insurance and ultimately the desire of those that pushed through Obamacare. We'd ultimately end up with socialized medicine, ration care. I'm not a fan of the term single payer because it masks what we're really talking about. We're talking about government takeover of health care. And as we've watched the little precious child, Charlie Gard, his parents going through absolute hell, there have been so many questions. You know, okay, whether you agree or disagree, should he be allowed to have further surgery? Should he have been allowed to have a procedure that might have saved his life? It ends up going to court, and because of the laws in England with their socialized medicine, the government gets to choose who can have what potentially life-saving procedures, what life-enhancing procedures, and who can't. That is the nature of socialized medicine. And during my summer in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, back when I was in college as an exchange student over there, didn't just have tours. I saw the way people were treated in the socialized medicine of the Soviet Union. And I've heard even some of my dear friends, colleagues here in the House say, you know, well, we know socialized medicine always fails. And actually, that's something I don't know. What I know is, what I believe is, socialized medicine never actually fails. Now, socialism will always fail. It always has. Even going back to the New Testament church, when the Apostle Paul tried this beautiful, wonderful concept, bringing all into the common storehouse, sharing and sharing alike. Well, eventually he realized that's going to work in heaven just beautifully, but it sure doesn't work on earth. So, okay, here's a new rule. If you don't work, you don't eat. Why? Because in this beautiful, incredible world where people are human, they are imperfect, everyone has done wrong at some point, fallen short of the glory of God. Every one of us, nobody is perfect, so you can't have a perfect system that does anything but become a totalitarian government. It has to become totalitarian in order to force people to bring into the common storehouse. And when you do that, you eliminate the incentives that have proved over recorded history to be the least effective. If you don't have incentives, it's ineffective. People don't work the hardest. And, Mr. Speaker, I've mentioned before, but there was a great example during that summer in the Soviet Union at a collective farm 30 miles or so outside of Kiev. It was thousands and thousands of acres, but I could not tell the difference between the cultivated areas and the non-cultivated areas. And I've worked on farms and ranches, and I know this was in the middle of July. Well, in July, we're about the same latitude in East Texas, and you want to get out there as close to sunup as you can because it gets so hot by mid-afternoon. You want to be finishing up by mid-afternoon. And here it was, the middle of the morning, and most of the farmers were out there in the middle of the village area there in the shade. And back in Mount Pleasant growing up, we had some of the older gentlemen had a spit and whittle club, and that reminded me of that. You know, the old guys just sitting around talking, young and old. And so I tried to use my best Russian and ask, you know, when do you work out in the field? Obviously, these guys hadn't worked up a sweat all morning. And, you know, trying to be pleasant, when do you work out in the field? And they all laughed, so I thought maybe I didn't say it right. But one of them then responded in Russian, I make the same number of rubles if I'm out there in the sun or I'm here in the shade, so I'm here in the shade. Obviously not forgotten, and that is such a great example why socialism never works, because there is no incentive to work. Oh, yeah, you can punish people, but that doesn't provide nearly the incentive as the Pilgrims found their beautiful compact, bring into the common storehouse, share and share alike, and after they lost so many people that first harsh winter, they tried something that we call private property. You got to keep what you produced, and wow, did it work out well. And it's worked out well over the years, even to the present time, although this government has continued to buy and take over more and more land, move in the direction of being socialistic. But our medicine has not been really socialistic. It has been taken over more and more by government and the insurance companies. In the world, did the insurance companies support Obamacare, the ACA, when it passed? Because they were so short-sighted. I think they and the big companies knew that eventually well, by signing on to Obamacare, they were signing their own death warrants, not immediately. And those executives that got involved, they would be able to take their golden parachutes and their millions and millions of dollars in distributions. But ultimately, we would become a socialized medicine country. You would see mortality rates begin to come down, where people didn't live as long. People would not get the knees, the back surgeries, the hips, the things, you know, hearing aids. The government ends up deciding who's worthy and who is not. So America, they voted the Democrats out of majorities in the House and Senate mainly because they pushed through Obamacare, and the huge majority of Americans were satisfied with their health insurance plans, and their health care. There is a big difference. But those terms, health insurance, health care, have been skewed, the differences. There is a big difference. But we have got to get back to a place where patients and doctors have a relationship unencumbered and without being separated by insurance companies and the government. But if we don't repeal Obamacare, we will move to total government control, and Charlie Gard's situation where the government says, you can have a life-saving procedure, you cannot. That day has already come, and it's going to be a common occurrence if we don't keep our promise and repeal Obamacare. So I was down there when they voted to proceed to debate, but honest to goodness, even though I've been here 12 years, think nothing shocks me, I couldn't believe that so many people who promised over and over and over and over again, we will repeal Obamacare, we will end Obamacare, we will get you back control of your health care, we'll get you back affordable health care. They couldn't vote even for the skinny bill. I mean, it hardly did much of anything to Obamacare, even a little bit. And it's the first time I'm aware of in the history of the United States Congress where one body contacted the other body, the Senate, in this case, contacted the Republicans in the House and said, please, we think we can pass our bill in the Senate, but you've got to promise us you won't pass it in the House. We'll go to conference. Please promise us you won't pass it in the House. We got a chance to pass in the Senate. What kind of governance is that? Well, I think it's a good thing to take a break from being here in session where we talk to ourselves too much. I think that's a problem here on both ends of the House. I'm proud of some of the things we've done here in the House. We've made some progress. We need to make a lot more. We need to pass the tax reform. I want to see the corporate tax get down to 15%. So those thousands and actually hundreds of thousands and millions of jobs that went to China can come back to the United States. Why? Because we undercut the the income tax that China charges to corporations. And what's a corporate tax? It's an insidious fee that have to pay where the government makes them think they're not paying it. Oh, it's the evil corporation paying. No, it's every customer pays for the corporate tax. You reduce that tax, we become competitive around the world in things that we're not currently competitive. Jobs come back here, and as any historian can tell you, a international power that does not produce the things they need in a time of war will not remain an international power after the next war. When we lost production of steel, of rubber, of tires, all these things that are critical in a time of war, it will encourage our enemies to take advantage of the fact that they provide the things we'll need in a time of war. And the only way you really effectively avoid war, as President Reagan made clear, you become so strong, nobody wants to fight you. And those are the small areas, times of peace in world history. Either when someone is so strong, they force the evil leaders in the world to stay at bay where people have peace. I want peace. I want a strong America. I want to keep our promises and have tax cuts. And I feel pretty comfortable. We're going to do it in the House. And I just hope and pray, Mr. Speaker, that those in the Senate who have made promises about repealing Obamacare and cutting taxes will have the kind of August where God lays it on their hearts that it's not a good thing to lie to the American people or constituents, that the best thing I can do for myself and for my country is to keep my promises. And with that, I yield back.
Does the gentleman have a motion?
I move we do now.